The boy was forced to change from an alpha to an omega. Enduring countless hurts from the man, he finally left in utter heartbreak. Watching the empty villa, the man suddenly realized his mistake. Baby, let's get back together. See a paranoid, dominant alpha clash with a cool, stubborn alpha. His name is G Ran and he's an alpha. Currently surrounded by a group of people, the sound of steady footsteps approaches. A tall figure gradually comes into view. Put the knife down, G Ran, he shuddered. Yi Linghan is the best alpha in Kyoto. His powerful presence makes Ji Ran involuntarily want to submit. Yi Linghan approached Ji Ran. Do you really intend to keep fighting with me? I care for you so much, why won't you make even the slightest change for me? Ji Ran firmly stated, I am an alpha, ever since I differentiated at 18, I have been a thorough alpha. Yi Linghan righteously said, I'm also doing this for your own good. Ji Ran struggled to free himself from his grip for my sake. I used to think that you truly cared for me. For you, even as an alpha, I was willing. But you actually sought out an omega synthesizer, just to leave descendants for the Yi family. Yi Linghan felt somewhat heartbroken. Ran. I've tried my hardest to win your parents' approval for you. How can you doubt me? Ji Ran's heart was as cold as a glacial valley. Do you know if the synthesizer causes rejection, I could die? Yi Linghan's face turned displeased. Aren't you warming up to me? If you are, why won't you take the risk for me? There's only a 50% chance of experiencing a rejection reaction. Doesn't that mean there's also a 50% chance of success? Ji Ran looked at him. What if I die? Yi Linghan grabbed his shoulders. It won't happen, trust me. Ji Ran laughed. Trust him? It was trusting him too much before that led to losing everything. I won't inject the synthesizer. Yi Linghan's gaze turned cold. Ran, don't force me. Yi Linghan lowered his gaze. Inject him with the synthesizer. If he doesn't listen, knock him out and tie him up. Ji Ran was shocked again. He couldn't believe the man could be so ruthless. The bodyguard's orders surrounded Ji Ran. As an ALF, Ji Ran has strong combat abilities, but with more and more bodyguards, he simply can't compete. As the serum is injected into his body, Ji Ran lets out a sorrowful roar. Yi Linghan, I hate you. Watching all this indifferently, then hate it is, all because of a man's words. The boy was forced to change from an alpha to an omega, and from then on, he was confined. 3 days later, the boy opened his eyes. He moved his body, in pain, all his joints aching. Ji Ran's eyes filled with desolate mist, all brought by the person he once loved the most. Noise came from outside the door. It's been 3 days, why hasn't he woken up? Yi Linghan's furious voice made Ji Ran's heart tremble. Ji Ran, you're awake. He strode over. He hugged Ji Ran tightly and gently kissed his neck. Yi Linghan's brows furrowed as his gaze instantly turned cold. Why is there no scent of pheromones? Still not giving up, Yi Linghan leaned down again to sniff, but there was still nothing. Suddenly, Ji Ran started to laugh. Disappointed, aren't you? How could I, an alpha, possibly turn into an omega? Yi Linghan muttered, it must be that the effects of the synthetic haven't kicked in yet. Ji Ran gazed at the handsome man before him. Yi Linghan, do you really love me? Yi Linghan was taken aback. Ji Ran let out a bitter laugh. He had been deceived by Yi Linghan's face and so-called affection. After so many years of wholehearted devotion, all he got in return was this profound hurt. Suddenly, Yi Linghan became agitated. After all these years together, you still doubt me? What kind of person can I have? Why would I be with you if not for love? You really don't understand. I want you to become an omega so you can rightfully become Madame Yi, not just an unnamed Mr. G. Ji Ran looked at him squarely. What if I can't turn into an omega? Yi Linghan held Ji Ran tightly in his arms. You won't fail to become one. Trust me. When you become an omega, we can be together legitimately. Ji Ran's heart wavered. Perhaps Yi Linghan did love him and had resorted to this scheme just to be with him. 7 days later, the professors at the major research institutions stiffened their spines. Young Master Yi, please be patient. Turning alpha into omega, this kind of experiment, we have never done it before. Failure is common. Yi Linghan's gaze suddenly deepens. You treat this as an experiment? I don't care what methods you use, you must turn Ji Ran into an omega. I'll give you a week. If you can't find a solution, all of you can get lost. As soon as Yi Linghan steps out of the research institute, his phone rings. Father, you've been playing around for so many years. Isn't it time to settle down? The family has decided on an arranged marriage with the Gon family. Don't make things difficult for me. Yi Linghan responds in a deep voice, is it if I find someone to bring home, you'll stop bothering me? Then, let's have the arranged marriage. Eventually, the boy turned from alpha to omega. Just when he thought he could be with the man forever, the man is going to marry someone else. After hanging up the phone, Yi Linghan returns to the villa and sees Ji Ran sitting on the sofa reading a book as soon as he opens the door. Ji Ran looks up at him, and that look makes Yi Linghan remember the first time he saw him. Through the crowd, with just one glance, Yi Linghan was moved. But when he got closer, he discovered Ji Ran was an alpha. After much thought, he finally won Ji Ran over. It's not easy to find someone you like. Gender really shouldn't be an obstacle. But gradually, Yi Linghan realized that omegas suit him better. If Ji Ran were an omega, all the problems they faced would be easily solved. Yi Linghan approached Ji Ran. Are you feeling it today? Ji Ran replied, no. Yi Linghan was extremely disappointed. How can you not feel it? If you want an omega that badly, there are plenty out there. Yi Linghan was frustrated. Why do you have to be like this again? If I wanted to find an omega, would I be wasting my time with you? After saying that, he pulled Ji Ran closer. Look at you now, you don't have half the cuteness you used to. Isn't it just about making you an omega? Ji Ran was also furious. Haven't I given enough over these years? Yi Linghan clenched his teeth. Even if you can't become an omega, you're not much different from one. Ji Ran's face was burning with humiliation and pain. With a roar of anger, Ji Ran raised his fist and smashed it towards Yi Linghan. Jiren roared and swung his fist at Yi Linghan, who quickly grabbed his wrist. Am I wrong? So what if you are an alpha? You're just like an omega, besides not having children. Tell me, what's the difference between you and an omega? The pain was too much for Jiren, not just physically but also emotionally. When Jiren woke up, it was already the next morning. Jiren had been in this villa for 3 days. When exactly would this captivity end? What exactly does Yi Linghan think of him? A docile and lovable pet dog? He's not a canary trapped in a cage, he's a thinking person. Suddenly, his gaze sharpened. It's the scent of an omega's pheromones. This scent is coming from his body. He has actually turned into an omega. The first thought that popped into his head was to tell Yi Linghan. If he knew, he would certainly be happy. Although he hated Yi Linghan for turning him into an omega, Jiren didn't want to leave him. Those years of feelings weren't fake. Maybe he could be with Yi Linghan forever. But just as he unlocked his phone, he saw a push notification for a news article. The shocking marriage alliance between the Yi and Gon families, a powerful union. The boy was forced to change from an alpha to an omega. He thought he could finally be with a man, but then the man DH with someone else. Ji Ran felt he must be hallucinating. How could Yi Linghan DH? He had said he would only be with him in this lifetime. He must have seen it wrong. Ji Ran kept looking over the news content, finally certain it wasn't a hallucination, not a delusion. Today was the day Yi Linghan and Gon Rui DH. No wonder Yi Linghan hadn't been to the villa recently. It turns out he had a beloved companion. Just now, he even felt happy about becoming an omega and slapped himself hard in anger. He laughed mockingly. No, he couldn't stay here. If the servants in the villa found out he had become an omega, they would definitely tell Yi Linghan. He must escape immediately. If Yi Linghan marked him, he would never be able to escape for the rest of his life. Ji Ran leapt and ran toward the outside of the villa area. The scent of his pheromones was very strong. If this continued, he probably wouldn't last much longer. Several alphas, like wolves that have caught the scent of blood, followed the smell and found Ji Ran, who had already run onto the road. Driven by instinct, they relentlessly pursued Ji Ran. Ji Ran, with a quick move, dashed through the crowd, pulled open the door of a sedan parked by the roadside, dragged the person inside out, started the car, and sped away. He is an alpha, he absolutely cannot be marked by anyone. Ji Ran, relying on his strong willpower, arrived at a clinic. Just as he pushed the door open, he completely lost his strength to stand. Someone supported him. Ji Ran, what's wrong with you? Actually, as soon as Ji Ran entered, he had already smelled the strong scent of pheromones on him. Ji Ran tightly grabbed Sheng Wiking's arm. Brother Sheng, help me, give me an inhibitor. Meanwhile, half an hour before the DH ceremony starts, Yi Linghan was sitting in the lounge, surrounded by makeup artists and stylists. A stylist was adjusting his hairstyle. A mirror was pushed in front of Yi Linghan. Mr. Yi, please have a look, are you satisfied? The man in the mirror looked noble and elegant, but Yi Linghan seemed indifferent to his own styling. He kept his eyes on the phone, guessing that Ji Ran would soon find out about his departure. Let Ji Ran cool off for a few days, and he will naturally realize his value. By then, Ji Ran would beg him to come back as before. At this moment, the phone in the villa rang. Yu, his brow furrowed, quickly answered. Young Master Yi, young Master Ji is missing. The boy was forced to turn from an alpha into an omega to avoid being forcibly marked by the man. The boy could only run away but didn't expect to fall into the man's hands again. At this moment, Yi Linghan was exuding a cold and fierce killing intent. Such a big person, And you few couldn't keep an eye on him, useless. The assistant reminded, young Master Yi, the banquet is about to start. Yi Linghan turned his head and sent people to search. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, find Ji Ran. Then he strode downstairs. As he reached the stairway, he ran into a few people. Yi Yunping saw his son rushing and asked, "Where are you going? Urgent matter?" Yi Yunping roared, "Stop. No matter how urgent, you must wait until the banquet is over." Yi Linghan stopped in his tracks, clenching his fist, and then he turned his head, saying he couldn't wait, and again strode towards the door. The gentle Omega beside him consoled, "Uncle, please don't be angry. Young Master Yi must have something very important to deal with. I'll go down and speak to the guests. I think they would understand." On the other side, "What did you say? Yi Linghan actually turned you into an Omega?" Actually, what Ji Ran is most worried about now is whether he can turn back into an Omega. He doesn't want to be marked by Yi Linghan, nor does he want to become a caged bird for life. Sheng Wiking comforted, "This requires a blood test for further examination. But based on the current data, I'm not sure what Yi Linghan injected you with, but you are indeed an alpha now. To be precise, you are an alpha until your sensitive period comes." Ji Ran's face turned pale as he hung his head down. "So am I an alpha or an omega?" Sheng Wiking stepped forward to administer his although we can't be sure right now. Rest assured, no matter what, I will definitely find a way to turn you back. That evening, just as Ji Ran stepped out of Sheng Wiking's clinic, his phone suddenly rang. It was a call from Yi Linghan. Ji Ran didn't think twice before hanging up. However, the phone persisted in ringing. Just as Ji Ran was about to blacklist Yi Linghan's number, a pair of hands landed on his shoulders, and the man's overpowering aura instantly enveloped him, only to hear Yi Linghan say coldly, "Am I treating you too well, so much so that you've forgotten what you are?" Ji Ran's face turned pale. "Did you come to find me just to say this?" He had naively thought he would come to explain about DH. Without any chance to resist or react, he was dragged by Yi Linghan into the car. With a loud bang, Ji Ran was thrown dizzy, taking a long time to come to his senses. "What do you want to do?" The man leaned in close. "Are you entering a sensitive period?" The boy, forced to transition from an alpha to an omega, had run away to avoid being marked by the man. In order not to be marked by a man, he ran away, yet he was still caught by a man. At this moment, Yi Linghan is pressing down on him. "Are you experiencing your sensitive period?" Ji Ran is startled and turns even paler. "No, I can't let him see." He forces himself to calm down. "There's nothing," and then he tears open his collar. "You can smell for yourself." Ji Ran's fingers are trembling, but Yi Linghan, eager to verify, doesn't notice. There is no scent of pheromones at all, only the scent of an alpha. How can this be? He irritably pushes Ji Ran away. Sitting aside with a face as dark as iron, Ji Ran suddenly seeks out Sheng Wiking. Could it be not because of his sensitive period? I've told you many times not to look for Sheng Wiking. Have all my words gone in one ear and out the other? Ji Ran sneers. Shouldn't you, young Master Yi, be very busy today? Oh right, I haven't congratulated you yet. Yi Linghan gets angry. Must you always talk to me in such a sarcastic tone? If you considered me at all, I wouldn't have had to get together with Gon Rui. Ji Ran looks at him incredulously. Don't make excuses for your betrayal. And who you're with has nothing to do with me. After speaking, he tries to pull open the car door, intending to get out. Yi Linghan grabbed his wrist. Ji Ran shook it slightly, but it didn't move an inch. Let go. Yi Linghan glared at Ji Ran fiercely. What did you just say? Ji Ran blurted out, I said it doesn't matter to me who you're with. But before he could finish, Yi Linghan sealed his lips. Ji Ran wanted to resist, but as the most outstanding alpha, Yi Linghan had absolute strength. Yi Linghan, you're crazy. Ji Ran was a bit scared. He couldn't be like this with Yi Linghan now. He just went through a sensitive period, and although he had an inhibitor injection, there was still a risk. If something really happened, he would never be a true alpha again. Ji Ran used all his strength to free one hand. Then he raised his hand and slapped Yi Linghan across the face. The sudden move stunned both of them. Yi Linghan's gaze instantly turned icy. He was the pride of heaven, never before had anyone hit him. He grabbed Ji Ran by the neck. You dare hit me? Ji Ran looked at him fearlessly. Yi Linghan raised his hand high. He really must be crazy. Why, even now, couldn't he bring himself to hit him? The fist finally landed on Ji Ran's face. He pressed Ji Ran's hand again, reluctant to hit him, so he had to torture him in another way. The boy was forced to change from an alpha to an omega. Just as he entered his sensitive period, he faced the man's mark. How could he escape the fate of the child? In the previous episode, Yi Linghan wanted to mark Ji Ran. Ji Ran was terrified. Although he had taken inhibitors at this time, it was hard to guarantee there wouldn't be exceptions. So, he slapped Yi Linghan directly. This completely enraged Yi Linghan, who had been the favored son of heaven and had never been hit before. But no matter what, he just couldn't bring himself to hurt Ji Ran. So, he decided to torture Ji Ran in another way. Yi Linghan's sudden movement scared Ji Ran. Ji Ran didn't know his current situation and was afraid that Yi Linghan's recklessness would result in him having a child. His fingers were tightly pressing against the car window. At this moment, he felt very desperate, but more than that, he was terrified. Ji Ran was hit so hard that his body ached, as if he was about to fall apart. In the final moments, he pleaded in a humble tone, "Please, I beg you, no more." Yi Linghan was surprised. Ji Ran, being an alpha, was usually so dominant. He had never softened his stance before. What happened today? Hearing the sound of his soft voice begging for mercy melted Yi Linghan's heart. Without a second thought, he complied with Ji Ran's request. Ji Ran finally breathed a sigh of relief, then blacked out. Yi Linghan caught him in his arms. Previously so strong, now he still had to yield. "You, what's the use of being so stubborn? You have the mouth of a knife but a heart of tofu. You resist me on the surface, but deep down, you still love me, don't you?" Yi Linghan felt a bit smug. He kissed Ji Ran's forehead. "Let's go home." Upon returning to Yi Linghan's villa, the servants, uneasy, went up to admit their faults and informed him that the master had arrived and had been waiting in the living room for a long time. As soon as Yi Linghan entered the living room, he was met with a torrent of scolding from his father. If it weren't for Gan Rui stepping in, the Yi family would have become a laughingstock by now. "I don't care what nonsense you pull off outside, but from now on, you're to report to me every day. And when Gan Rui's heat comes, you must mark him." Yi Linghan sipped his coffee. "Isn't this a bit irresponsible? Besides, I'm not interested in Omegas." Old Master Yi got angry again. "Shut up. Don't forget you're the only son and the sole heir of the Yi family lineage." Yi Linghan paused. If it wasn't for his desire to be with Ji Ran, why would he have dealt with Gan Rui? Let's see if he's truly magnanimous or just pretending. Yi Linghan came to the guest room. "I have to say, Gan Rui is indeed good looking. For an alpha, he's very attractive." But Yi Linghan just feels that his face is not even 1/10,000th as attractive as Ji Ran's. Gan Rui rubbed his eyes. "Young Master Yi, you've come." Yi Linghan was not polite to him. "Thank you for what you did today, but I won't be with you." Gan Rui smiled softly. "Is it because of young Master Ji? If I remember correctly, he should be an AF. Let's make a deal. I can help you get what you want. With today's advanced technology, we don't need intimate contact. This way, your father won't interfere with who you're with." Yi Linghan looked at him. "What do you want?" Gan Rui said, "I want the entire Gan family, and 500 million. Almost without hesitation, Yi Linghan agreed. As long as he could be with Ji Ran, what difficulty is there in giving up the Gan family and 500 million? He was forced to change from an alpha to an omega. Now his beloved calls him boring and disgusting, and even leaves him to fend for himself. After Yi Linghan and Gan Rui reached an agreement, Yi Linghan went to Ji Ran's room. Ji Ran was still asleep, looking incredibly enticing. Yi Linghan felt a slight movement in his heart and leaned in. Ji Ran instinctively caught him. Feeling his response, Yi Linghan felt very proud. He knew Ji Ran couldn't bear to leave him. Ji Ran smelled a strong scent of omega pheromones. Not good, he suddenly pushed Yi Linghan away. "Don't touch me." Yi Linghan suddenly became angry. "What are you doing? I stayed up all night for you and this is how you treat me?" Ji Ran questioned. "Did you touch him?" He really couldn't imagine what to do if Yi Linghan had marked Gan Rui. What if Yi Linghan marked Gan Rui? "I've always been someone who can't see the light of day." How pathetic. Ji Ran's questioning made Yi Linghan very angry. "If I had touched him, why would I come back to endure your sarcasm? Gan Rui is much gentler and cuter than you. He's willing to have a child for me. Look at you, what can you do for me?" Every word from Yi Linghan was like a knife. His eyes were full of sadness. "Does loving you mean giving up on my own life?" Yi Linghan noticed Ji Ran's grievance and let go of his hand. "You weren't like this before. You've become more and more boring. I don't even know why I came back. Just the sight of you makes me sick." Ji Ran's face turned deathly pale, and Yi Linghan had already walked out of the bedroom without looking back. Ji Ran's tears streamed down. Boring and disgusting, how ironic. The man he loved without dignity evaluated him like this. Due to the reaction of the conversion agent, Ji Ran developed a fever. The sustained high fever frightened the servants in the villa. They hurriedly called Yi Linghan. At this time, Yi Linghan was attending a business banquet. Gan Rui reminded him, "Young Master Yi, your phone is ringing." Yi Linghan angrily hangs up the phone. It must be Ji Ran asking him to come back. This time, he must coldly ignore him for a few days. It was all because he was too indulgent before. Every time they argue, no matter whose fault it is, Ji Ran is always the first to apologize. In the past, he could tolerate and concede to himself, but now he has become so arrogant and ungrateful. The phone rings again, and a strong chill emanates from the bottom of Yi Linghan's heart. He answers the call. Speak, what is it? The butler's anxious voice comes through the phone. Young Master Yi, young Master Ji is sick. Yi Linghan sneers, thinking Ji Ran is just too proud to ask him to return and is now pretending to be sick for sympathy. The butler, sweating anxiously, says, no, young Master Ji is really sick. I've just sent you a video, you'll know once you see it. Yi Linghan, irritated, replies, I don't have time to watch him act, tell him to save it. He always says he's an alpha, with such a good constitution, then let him deal with it himself. The call is mercilessly ended. Ji Ran is the most stubborn. To make him yield, Yi Linghan knows he must be ruthless. 7 days later, Ji Ran finally wakes up. During those 7 days, Yi Linghan hadn't made a single call. He even withdrew all the servants from the villa, leaving Ji Ran without even a sip of hot water. Ji Ran knows Yi Linghan is forcing him to yield and bow, but this time, he won't succumb to his will anymore. The boy was forced to change from an alpha to an omega, and under the man's various tortures, he finally gave up. However, the man did not intend to let him go. In the last episode, Ji Ran fell ill. Yi Linghan thought Ji Ran was pretending and even withdrew all the servants from the villa, leaving Ji Ran without a single sip of hot water. Ji Ran knew that Yi Linghan was forcing him to submit, but this time he would not yield to his will. After recovering, Ji Ran decided to return to school to prepare for his graduation. Just as he got out of the taxi, Ji Ran's gaze was drawn to two figures in the distance. Their actions were unusually intimate, like a couple in love. Ji Ran suddenly realized that it must be Yi Linghan coming to drop off Gan Rui for school. He gave a bitter smile. He and Yi Linghan had been in a relationship for 4 years, but Yi Linghan only took him to school when he was pursuing him. After winning him over, it was always Ji Ran going to Yi Corporation to find Yi Linghan. Sometimes, when Yi Linghan had meetings or was busy with work, Ji Ran would wait for hours or even a whole day, and he did so without any complaints or regrets. Now that he thinks about it, he was really an idiot blinded by love at that time. It's just that he blames himself for bringing this upon himself. But it really hurts here. Knowing that they are already engaged, but still unable to control his own heart. I don't want to see these two again. He quickened his pace to leave, but a stop made him halt. Ji Ran turned his head. Yi Linghan, holding Gan Rui's hand, had already walked over. The butler told me you were sick. You don't look sick. If you want to see me, you don't need such an excuse. If you ask me sincerely, I might come to see you. Ji Ran felt a sharp pain in his heart. He turned away. I don't want to see you. Then he lifted his foot to leave. However, Yi Linghan didn't let him. Did I say you could leave? Ji Ran's eyes reddened. You're already engaged, what else do you want from me? Linghan sneered, what do I want? Seeing me trying to walk away, are you playing hard to get? Ji Ran, how did you become like this? Your scheming nature really makes me. Ji Ran lowered his head. If adding sin to sin, why fear no words? If there's no love, everything is wrong. Gan Rui tugged at Yi Linghan's sleeve. Yi Xiao, I think that's enough. Yi Linghan mocked, Ji Ran, if you had even a fraction of Rui's understanding, I wouldn't hate you so much. Han felt that after saying this, Ji Ran would not hold his arm and beg. However, Yi Linghan made a miscalculation. Since Mr. Yi knows I detest and find him boring, let's not contact each other again. Yi Linghan's face suddenly turned very ugly. He grabbed Ji Ran's hand fiercely. Dare you say that again? Ji Ran broke free from his grasp and strode into the school. Yi Linghan watched Ji Ran's departing figure. He just said no more contact, but in his own eyes, he's clearly just a plaything. Only I can discard him, he has no right to initiate leaving. From that day on, knowing Yi Linghan's identity and status, he would never allow himself to engage in a love affair without offspring. He was always prepared for an eventual breakup. Now that he's sobered up, it's time to put an end to this relationship. Suddenly, hands were laid on his shoulders. Who allowed you to leave? Without my permission, you're not allowed to go anywhere. Ji Ran is bullied by Yi Linghan again. Just because he uttered the word breakup, he was ensnared by Yi Linghan from then on. In the last episode, Ji Ran let go, hoping Yi Linghan would not contact him again. He didn't have the right to say he was leaving first. Ji Ran tried hard to break free from his grip. What right do you have to interfere with my freedom? You are already engaged, don't bother me anymore. Yi Linghan had never been treated so coldly by Ji Ran in their 4 years of dating. Speaking so firmly now, Yi Linghan couldn't accept it. He grabbed Ji Ran tightly. Ji Ran, I'll say it one last time, only I can say I don't want you. You don't have the right to break up. Keep dreaming. In life, you're mine. In death, you're my ghost. Ji Ran's heart tightened sharply. How much of a bastard do you have to be to say such things? He bit Yi Linghan's shoulder hard. He bit Yi Linghan's shoulder. Whether you accept it or not, I tell you I won't go back to that place with you again. Yi Linghan's face turned gloomy. Jiren, I have really spoiled you, making you more and more unruly, and unable to recognize your own identity, becoming someone who disgusts me. Jiren lowered his head and gave a self-deprecating smile. Since you despise me so much, we might as well part ways and never see each other again. Yi Linghan's eyes suddenly widened. You still insist on leaving me? Jiren looked at him resolutely. In that moment, Yi Linghan actually felt fear. With his noble status, so many excellent Omegas had thrown themselves at him. He grabbed Jiren's hand, but why did he just not want to let him go? He dragged Jiren to the nearby ginkgo forest. Jiren had just recovered from a serious illness and was no match for Yi Linghan. Yi Linghan pushed him against a ginkgo tree and then pressed himself against him. You are not allowed to leave. I don't agree to break up. You can forget about leaving me in this lifetime. You see, you are already used to me. You've been very lonely these days without me around, right? Jiren verbally denied it, but his body was very honest. Yi Linghan smugly curled his lips. Can you really leave me like this? You can't be a normal alpha anymore. Look at you now. Do you still have the ability to mingle with betas and omegas? The mocking words made Ji Ran feel utterly humiliated. With strength from who knows where, Ji Ran suddenly broke free from Yi Linghan. Yi Linghan, we were once deeply in love, must you be so heartless? Yi Linghan pinned Ji Ran against the tree once again. I'm heartless because you're willful. After saying that, he forcibly tore Ji Ran's clothes. Be good, I don't want to hurt you, he murmured as his lips touched that fair skin. Ji Ran threw a punch. Don't touch me, I find you disgusting. Yi Linghan touched his face in disbelief. What right do you have to find me disgusting, to say such things in front of me? The next second, he pounced on Ji Ran. Tearing off all of Ji Ran's clothes, Ji Ran's eyes were filled with fear. Yi Linghan, you've really gone mad. Ji Ran was bullied by Yi Linghan again, photographed and threatened, and what's more terrifying is that Ji Ran's omega glands acted up at that moment. In the last episode, we saw Yi Linghan pounce directly on Ji Ran in the midst of a bustling campus, with no one lingering around the tree-lined promenade. Listening to Ji Ran's subdued voice, Yi Linghan's blood boiled with desire. Ji Ran may have a temper, but his body could be the death of him. Although he has Ji Ran now, why does it still feel insufficient? Yi Linghan grasps Ji Ran's neck. Who else can satisfy you but me? His words pierced Ji Ran's heart, causing agony so intense he wished to cease existing. Ji Ran closed his eyes in despair. After a brief tidy up, Yi Linghan returned to his refined and noble demeanor. In contrast, Ji Ran looked much more disheveled. The sight of Ji Ran, clothes in disarray, made Yi Linghan's breathing grow heavy. He really couldn't bear to part with Ji Ran, even if he couldn't become an omega. Keeping him close wouldn't be too bad. The pity was that he was so unteachable. In an effort to control Ji Ran, he took out his phone. He snapped several photos of the disheveled Ji Ran. Hearing the shutter sound, Ji Ran jerked his head up. What are you doing? Yi Linghan twisted his wrist in retaliation. Isn't it obvious what I am doing? Then he pressed him against the silver birch tree, continuously taking pictures. Ji Ran was so anxious that his eyes were red. How could Yi Linghan do such a thing? He can't just take photos of him. Yi Linghan took a lot of photos, and finally, contentedly, he let go of Ji Ran. He smirked and coldly said, Ji Ran, I'm warning you, don't you dare leave my side. If I find out you've done anything to betray me, I will immediately release these photos. Do you believe that with a simple flick of my fingers, I can ruin you? Ji Ran believed him. He knew Yi Linghan was capable of anything. Yi Linghan threw clothes at Ji Ran. Behave and go to class, no tricks. After school, obediently return to the villa and wait for me. His arrogant words felt like commands, making Ji Ran feel like he was nothing but a lowly being. Ji Ran clenched his fists tightly, not letting his expression reveal anything. Yi Linghan was always observing. Ji Ran didn't even get angry despite the harsh words. Thinking about this possibility, Yi Linghan's heart clenched abruptly. A fear that was indescribable suddenly turned to anger. Maybe anyone could betray and leave him, but not Ji Ran. Shung Ganru will soon be in heat. I'll mark him. So treasure the time I'm with you. Maybe in a few days, I'll be completely sick of you. Ji Ran suddenly widened his eyes, his face as pale as paper. Yi Linghan really wanted to be with Ganrui. After a long time, Ji Ran finally regained some strength. Yi Xiao, congratulations. I wish you and Gong Xiao an early birth of your child and a long-lasting marriage. Yi Linghan couldn't believe it. What did you say? Yi Linghan looked at Ji Ran's departing figure. His eyes suddenly turned cold. He meant it. Exiting the ginkgo forest, Ji Ran almost used up all his strength. Ji Ran wanted to pull himself together, forget this relationship, and start anew. At this moment, Ji Ran stumbled and fell to the ground. At the same time, a faint fragrance emitted from his body. Damn, he had grown omega glands. Ji Ran suddenly entered a sensitive period. How could he escape the pursuit of so many alphas? Previously, we mentioned that after being bullied, Ji Ran smelled a faint fragrance, and omega glands appeared on his wrist. The red spots became more prominent, and the pheromones on his body grew stronger. What should he do? In a few seconds, the passing students noticed. Ji Ran clenched his fists, thinking he must not be discovered in a school full of alphas. He started running quickly. Yi Linghan had just reached the school gate when a large group of students ran southward, saying something. Omeg, Yi Linghan became vigilant. The wind blew past, carrying a faint fragrance. The sweet, enticing scent made Yi Linghan's blood boil. A flash of realization crossed Yi Linghan's mind, and his pupils constricted sharply. Could it be that Ji Ran had become an omega because of the synthetic agent? The excitement in Yi Linghan's eyes grew more intense at this possibility. He must find Ji Ran and not let anyone else touch him. He changed direction and ran toward the crowd. Ji Ran staggered into the school auditorium, forcing himself to hold on. If one is marked by an alpha, from then on they can only be an omega. Ji Ran doesn't want to be dominated by any alpha, not even Yi Linghan. He turned around to lock the door and finally, unable to hold up, slid down. Soon after, loud banging sounds came from outside the door. Each bang made Ji Ran's heart tremble. Listening to the sounds coming from all directions, Ji Ran's heart sank bit by bit. Was he really going to be marked by an alpha? Yi Linghan arrived at the performance hall's entrance and saw that many alphas had already gathered there. He grabbed an alpha with bloodshot eyes, who's inside. The alpha couldn't be bothered to answer him. Yi Linghan kicked him fiercely, and at that moment there was a loud crash. A large hole was broken in the window and an alpha was climbing inside. Seeing this, Yi Linghan yanked the person out and threw him away forcefully. The person inside is mine. If anyone dares to touch him, I won't let you leave the school gates. Having said that, he turned and leapt through the broken window into the performance hall. His agile eyes searched around, the scent of pheromones in the air growing fainter. Yi Linghan's gaze sharpened as he sniffed. Oh, it's gone. Anxious to find Ji Ran, Yi Linghan didn't dwell on where the scent had gone. He quickly searched the performance hall. Ji Ran wasn't there. Could it be that the person just now wasn't Ji Ran? He takes out his phone to call Ji Ran. The exhibition hall is eerily quiet, not a sound to be heard. Just as Yi Linghan is about to hang up, he hears a faint ringing sound in the distance. Yi Linghan finally catches Ji Ran during his sensitive period. Can Ji Ran escape Yi Linghan's inspection? Previously, just as Yi Linghan was about to hang up, he heard a faint ringing sound in the distance and turned to see Ji Ran standing at the entrance of the exhibition hall. Yi Linghan quickly steps forward. The person inside just now was you, right? Are you experiencing your sensitive period? Ji Ran, with a cold face, I'm an alpha. I don't have a sensitive period. You've mistaken me for someone else. Yi Linghan obviously doesn't believe it. Impossible. Let me smell you. At that moment, a hand grabs Yi Linghan's wrist. Mr. Yi, please show some respect in public. Yi Linghan's gaze turns cold. What are you doing here? Sheng Wiking replies, I am a psychology professor at this school. Is it strange for me to be here? Yi Linghan's piercing gaze falls on Ji Ran. At such a close distance, Yi Linghan could clearly smell the scent belonging to an alpha from Ji Ran. Ji Ran, tell me, how come you're here? Ji Ran replied without revealing anything. With such a big incident happening at school, naturally, I had to come and see. Yi Linghan looked him over. Is that so? Sheng Wiking said, let's go. Ji Ran didn't even glance at Yi Linghan before turning to leave. Yi Linghan quickly followed. Ji Ran, I've warned you more than once not to associate with irrelevant people. Have my words been completely ignored, or do I really carry so little weight now? Ji Ran glanced at him. This is a school, not the Yi family's territory. Yi Linghan grabbed Ji Ran's arm. Stop. Nega, the sign of a gland, should be right here. Whether it is or isn't, one look will tell. Ji Ran's scalp exploded, his heart thumping uncontrollably. Yi Linghan was testing him. Yi Linghan gently stroked Ji Ran's wrist. Right or not, you tell me. Suddenly, someone rushed in. Professor Sheng, come take a look, there's an omega in heat over here. Yi Linghan's expression turned serious, and he looked somewhat disappointed, letting go of Ji Ran's hand. The omega, blushing, stammered, "I came looking for someone." Sheng Wiking carefully observed and realized that this omega had already been marked. Probably here to find the alpha. Yi Linghan also noticed something was amiss. That pheromone just now wasn't emitted by the person in front of him. Another omega is hiding in this campus. Could it be Ji Ran? Suddenly an alpha appeared. "Xiao Yue, why did you come here?" The little omega looked at the person in front of him with pleading eyes. "Today is my sensitive period. Can you help me? You marked me, you should take responsibility for me." The alpha shook him off coldly. "I've marked many, do you think I have to take responsibility for all of them? Don't daydream. And just look at yourself. At that time, I only helped you out of pity. Don't tell me you really thought I liked you." Ji Ran's fists cracked with anger. Enough with the scumbags. This was obviously an indirect criticism. Yi Linghan frowned. Sheng Wiking helped the little omega up and looked coldly at the alpha. "Unless you want to be expelled, behave better from now on." Then he turned his head, ready to call Ji Ran, but the corridor was empty. In order not to let Yi Linghan know that he is an omega, he is ready to burn all his bridges. But it was discovered during the medication. As mentioned before, Yi Linghan had some doubts. The scent of the pheromone just now was definitely not from that little omega. So, while Sheng Wiking was dealing with the omega incident, he directly took Ji Ran away. "Yi Linghan, let me go." In the end, Ji Ran punched Yi Linghan on the back. Yi Linghan, rubbing his back, was obviously a bit angry. "Make another scene, I dare you." Little did he know, Ji Ran really gave him another punch, then turned around and left. Yi Linghan was furious. He grabbed Ji Ran's arm. "Have you had enough?" After saying that, he picked up Ji Ran and strode towards the direction where the sedan was parked. Ji Ran was thrown harshly into the back seat, screaming in pain. After Yi Linghan got into the car, he immediately locked the door and then drove off quickly. Ji Ran pounded on the car door, roaring, "Stop the car, I want to get off." Yi Linghan, with a gloomy tone, said, "Shut up." Soon, the car arrived at the villa. As soon as Yi Linghan pushed the person into the villa's door, he pinned them against it and asked one last time, "Was the person at the school auditorium today you?" Ji Ran's heart raced with panic, wondering if Yi Linghan had become suspicious. Had he given anything away? He feigned calm and replied for the last time, "It wasn't me." Yi Linghan looked down at Ji Ran. The scent of the omega's pheromones was off. "So now you've learned to lie," he pondered as the image of a small omega kneeling and begging an alpha flashed through his mind again and again. If Yi Linghan discovered his secret and marked him completely, his fate might be the same as that small omega. He closed his eyes tight, refusing to end up like that. When he opened his eyes again, the panic was gone. "I didn't lie to you," he said as he began to unbutton his shirt. "If you don't believe me, you can check." Yi Linghan actually wasn't sure, and indeed, there was no scent of pheromones on Ji Ran. Could he really not be the one? Yi Linghan, feeling somewhat reluctant, draped the clothes back on Ji Ran. "All right, if the person today really wasn't you,